The story begins in a local fighting club where a man named Carter is beating his opponent and getting loud cheers from the crowd. Among the people watching, a woman named Frankie enters with her eyes fixed on Carter. She has heard a lot about him, and clearly he lives up to his reputation. Carter continues to hit his opponent hard before landing a powerful knockout punch to win the match. After his victory, Carter confidently speaks to the crowd, saying he will fight anyone who dares to challenge him. Then, a hooded man walks into the ring without any preparation. Carter looks at him, expecting another easy win. But the moment the man removes his hoodie, Carter's face changes. Fear takes over him when he realizes the man is Dalton, a former UFC fighter. The once confident Carter suddenly refuses to fight and leaves the ring, making Dalton the automatic winner. As he walks away, Carter shouts to the crowd, warning them that they have no idea who just stepped into the ring. Frankie now stands confused, wondering what kind of man Dalton is to make Carter so afraid that he quits on the spot. Later, an angry man approaches Dalton and stabs him because Dalton has cost him a lot of money. But Dalton stays calm and tells the man to think about his actions. This calm response makes the attacker nervous and scared, so he runs away from Dalton. After this, Frankie finds Dalton and is shocked to see the knife in his body. She urges him to go to the hospital, but Dalton treats the wound himself and says he doesn't need a doctor. Frankie then tells him that she owns a roadhouse in the Florida Keys. Recently, some gangs have been showing up every night and trashing the place. The police are not helping her, and all her bouncers have quit. She offers Dalton $5,000 a week for a month, along with a place to stay. However, Dalton turns her down, and Frankie leaves him her number in case he changes his mind. That night, Dalton feels hopeless and wants to end everything. He parks his car on a railway track and waits for a train to hit him. But as the train approaches, he changes his mind and drives away at the last second, narrowly escaping death. This moment changes something inside him. He starts to think about a fresh start and decides to accept Frankie's job offer. Next, Dalton heads to the Florida Keys and begins meeting the kind people of the town. First, he meets a bookstore owner named Charlie, who gives him a book to help him learn more about the town. He also meets her father, Stephen, who warmly welcomes him and shows him where the roadhouse is. Then Dalton walks into the roadhouse and meets Laura, the barista, and Billy, the bartender, who instantly recognizes him. Dalton feels calm for the first time in a long while, and even compliments Laura, saying the place feels peaceful. But she laughs, knowing that peace never lasts long there. This proves to be true as night falls. The roadhouse turns into chaos, and fights break out everywhere. But the real problem begins when the usual suspects arrive on their motorbikes and start wrecking the place. Dalton talks to them in a friendly tone and asks them to step outside and talk. When they refuse, he threatens to destroy their bikes and walks outside. Then they follow him out, and he calmly asks Frankie if there is a hospital nearby. Next, the goons gang up on him, ready to beat him up. But Dalton plays with them and fights them one by one until they are all lying on the ground. After the fight, he borrows Frankie's car and drives them to the hospital. At the hospital, Dalton meets a medical worker named Ellie, who notices he is bleeding. Ellie is upset that Dalton has added more work for her and her team, but she still treats his wounds. Later, when Dalton steps outside, the rest of the gang is already plotting to get their revenge. When Dalton returns to the bar, Frankie hands him his 1-week salary and offers him a houseboat nearby as a place to stay. However, she warns him that the boat is old and crocodiles are always lurking in the area. That night, Dalton feels good for the first time in a while and sleeps peacefully on the boat. However, he has flashbacks from his days as a UFC fighter, but luckily, Laura wakes him up because it is already morning. Then he goes outside for a walk and realizes he has become popular overnight because of how he handled the gang. Next, Dalton stops by the bookstore to meet Charlie. She tells him it is hard to make a living selling books, so her father works a second job. Her late mother came up with the idea of selling books, and now she feels it is her duty to keep that legacy alive. Meanwhile, a wealthy man named Ben, who hired the gang, receives bad news that Dalton is interfering with their plans. Ben had ordered them to scare away customers and ruin the roadhouse's business, but Dalton is not the kind of bouncer they expected. Later, two customers start arguing, and a fight seems about to break out. Billy, who looks up to Dalton, decides to confront them after hearing some encouraging words from him. One of the men pulls out a knife and tries to stab Billy, but thanks to Dalton's advice, Billy surprises himself and punches the man. Then, Dalton steps in to help, and together, they kick out all the troublemakers. For a while, life feels good in Florida, and Dalton finally finds peace by the beach. Things feel steady as they throw out troublemakers night after night. Billy's friend Reef also joins them to help deal with the trash, but danger is still close. The biker gang keeps watching and waiting for new orders from Ben. Dalton also continues to have dreams about his time in the ring, as if his past refuses to let him enjoy his new peaceful life. One morning, Dalton runs into Ellie at a cafeteria. She warns him about the town and tells him to be careful. However, Dalton doesn't seem bothered by any of it. Instead, he compliments her new hairstyle. Ellie walks away, but it is clear she is drawn to Dalton's carefree attitude. One night, as Dalton is heading back to his place, a car suddenly tries to run him over. He narrowly escapes, but the car returns and hits him, throwing him off a bridge. The people inside think they have killed him and drive away, but Dalton survives and makes it back to his houseboat. However, when he gets there, a man with a shotgun is waiting for him. Dalton reacts quickly and throws the man off the boat. Instantly, crocodiles swim toward the man and begin to devour him. Dalton tries to save him, but it is too late. The next morning, officials search for the body, but they find nothing. Dalton, still puzzled, wonders why the roadhouse is attracting so much violence and attention. One of the locals suggests it could be linked to drugs, so Dalton decides to investigate. At the bookstore, Charlie shows him a map of the harbor and explains that using the roadhouse as a docking point for drug shipments doesn't make sense. The surrounding reefs make it nearly impossible for boats to get close. As Dalton steps outside, a man approaches him with a gun tucked into his waistband and orders him into a car, saying Ben wants to talk. Dalton calmly walks toward the man and snaps his fingers. Another thug looks like he might step in, but he wisely backs off, too intimidated to move. Dalton tells them to give Ben a message. If Ben wants to talk, Dalton is at the roadhouse every night. Back at the roadhouse, Dalton questions Frankie about why the goons are so focused on her place. Frankie shrugs, thinking it must be some kind of territorial fight. Meanwhile, the injured thug returns to Ben and admits that he failed. Just then, Ben receives a call from his father, who is in prison. Frustrated, Ben throws his phone into the ocean. His father becomes furious and immediately calls a dangerous fighter named Knox. Knox is known for acting without thinking and never worrying about consequences. After hearing about Ben's situation, Knox agrees to help right away. Back in Glass Key, Ellie visits Dalton with a beautiful boat, and they go on an ocean date. They relax with cold beers, and Ellie tells him that Ben's family is extremely wealthy and built most of the town. As their conversation gets deeper, Dalton tries to pull away, but Ellie kisses him. She tells him she already knows a lot about him from the internet. After all, he was a famous UFC fighter. Meanwhile, Knox makes a dramatic entrance into town and goes straight to Ben's place. He toys with Ben's henchmen before telling Ben that his father sent him to clean up the mess. Ben is shocked to see his men serving Knox, but it is clear that Knox has orders and intends to stay until he kills the new bouncer. Ben warns Knox that he can't just kill someone in the middle of the street because the situation is too sensitive. But Ben convinces him to let him try one last time to handle things the easy way before Knox steps in. In the afternoon, Dalton returns from his date, but is stopped by a couple of officers who want to question him about the crocodile incident. Instead, they take him to the sheriff, who tells Dalton to leave town. Dalton doesn't take him seriously, so the sheriff orders his men to beat him up. Just as the sheriff is about to shoot him, Ellie shows up and slaps the sheriff, which surprises even Dalton. Later, as she drives Dalton away, she reveals that the sheriff is actually her father. She explains that her father used to work for Ben's father, who brought a lot of business to the town, but also brought drugs. Now that Ben's father is in prison, her father works for Ben. She warns Dalton to leave town before it consumes him too. Meanwhile, Ben's henchmen visit Charlie's bookstore with bad intentions. That night, Ben visits Dalton at the roadhouse and tries to provoke him by showing a video from a match that led to Dalton's early retirement from the UFC. In that match, Dalton was fighting for the championship against his friend. He won by knockout, but he didn't stop. He kept punching even after his opponent was unconscious, ignoring the referee's attempts to stop him. His friend died because of it, and that one mistake has haunted Dalton ever since. Ben thinks he has broken Dalton, but Dalton gives a sinister smile, showing that he is strong, both physically and emotionally. Ben gets furious when he sees this. He finally orders Knox and the gang to destroy the roadhouse and kill Dalton. Knox gladly accepts and immediately starts tearing the place apart. Billy and Reef try to fight back, but Knox easily beats them one by one. Some customers also try to stop him, but Knox is too strong and he destroys them without effort. The situation quickly turns into a massive bar fight, and the roadhouse falls into complete chaos. Knox then starts looking for Dalton because he is the reason Knox came. Eventually, Dalton steps forward to face him. Dalton stays calm, thinking his skills will be enough, but Knox is unpredictable and instantly headbutts him before the fight even begins. Dalton fights back with quick punches, and both men push themselves to their limits. However, Knox's brutal street fighting style starts wearing Dalton down, and Dalton is about to lose. Still, he regains his composure and walks away calmly, leaving Knox standing there with a twisted look of admiration, clearly enjoying the challenge. Later, back at the boathouse, Dalton packs his bags, ready to leave everything behind. Frankie arrives and apologizes for not being honest with him from the beginning. She begs him to stay and finally reveals the whole truth. Ben wants to build a luxury resort and has already bought all the land along the highway, except for her property. Dalton doesn't think this is enough reason for him to stay involved, so he decides to leave town. But just as he is about to leave, he sees that the bookstore has been burned to the ground. This makes him furious. He marches straight to Ben's place to find those responsible. Dalton quickly knocks one man out with a punch to the throat and throws him into the pool, killing him. Before he dies, Ben tells him that he was indeed afraid, but not of what they will do to him, but what he will do to them if they pushed him too far. He then finds another guy and learns that there is a meeting taking place where Ben will be part off. The man reveals that Ben is about to borrow money to make his plans of building a resort possible. The next day, Dalton wakes up early and intercepts a corrupt police boat that is supposed to deliver the money to Ben. Dalton stops the transfer and stages the scene to make it look like the police officer killed the man. He then kicks the officer in the head to make him forget everything he saw. Later, as Dalton prepares for a final showdown with Ben, the sheriff visits him and says that Ben has captured Ellie. He tells Dalton to return the stolen money or Ellie will be killed. The sheriff explains that he knows what Dalton did that morning because the officer remembered everything. The sheriff begs Dalton to help save his daughter, and Dalton agrees. Next, Dalton heads to Ben's luxurious boat and is shocked to see the sheriff sitting next to Ben. This surprises him because the sheriff had told him earlier that Ben had kidnapped Ellie. When Dalton brings up Ellie, the sheriff calmly says that he and Ben are partners, so Ben would never do such a thing. But the truth is, Ben really has kidnapped Ellie, which makes the situation confusing and tense. But then they see Knox speeding toward the boat, clearly angry that they are partying without him. This gives Dalton a chance to blow up the boat, which is packed with explosives. After the explosion, Dalton quickly looks for Ellie and finds her trapped under the deck, but the boat begins to sink. One of Ben's men chases them, so Dalton and Ellie swim toward the surface. When the man follows, Dalton beats him and smashes his head against Knox's speeding boat. However, Ben catches up to Ellie in another boat and escapes with her, leaving Dalton behind. Knox then tries to run Dalton over, but Dalton manages to grab onto the boat and knock Knox into the water. Dalton then speeds off in the boat, chasing Ben. Ben sees him and speeds toward him as well. Just as their boats are about to collide, Dalton jumps and lands inside Ben's boat. He beats Ben, and then both he and Ellie jump into the water as the boat crashes into the roadhouse. Meanwhile, Knox climbs onto a bridge and leaps into a speeding car, while the sheriff races to the roadhouse. Dalton returns to the destroyed roadhouse, where he teaches Ben a final lesson. Dalton completely overpowers Ben and beats him badly. But just as he is about to finish him, Knox crashes into the roadhouse, declaring that their fight is not over yet. Despite his injuries and exhaustion, Dalton faces Knox head-on, determined to end the violence once and for all. Both men fight with everything they have, each trying to kill the other. Eventually, Knox stabs Dalton and prepares to finish him. However, Ben appears and urges Knox to kill Dalton. This enrages Knox, and he kills Ben on the spot. When he turns back to Dalton, Dalton summons every ounce of strength he has left and stabs Knox multiple times. This finally ends Knox's rampage, and Dalton wins against all odds. The sheriff sees that his daughter is safe, and Ellie tells Dalton to leave. Later, Frankie begins repairing the roadhouse and tries to return to her normal life as quickly as possible. Finally, Dalton leaves town, despite Charlie asking him to stay. Charlie's father finds the money Dalton took and left inside the bookstore as a gesture to help them rebuild or even do more.